What an incredible last 3 days here at the Sing Conference in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been so encouraged, as you see this set here, to have interviews with key speakers and hear really just wonderful testimonies. Things that I know will encourage you in learning how to share your faith with a crazy culture, how to just grow deeper in your walk with Jesus, and then to hear what God is doing around the world. Now, I pray you'll stay tuned and that you'll watch this next video, and I know that it'll be an encouragement to you.
Well, it's such a pleasure to have you here today, Torben. We have Torben Jensen with us. You're originally from Denmark, but you've done missions and done work all around the world. I believe you visited 60 countries. Some of your titles have included pastor, counselor, discipleship trainer, and currently your role is as ministry relations manager with Joni and Friends. And such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, one of the questions that I would love to start with is, what do you believe keeps modern Christians from sharing the gospel?
I think everything, when it comes to the truth of God, is very simple. And we can overcomplicate the Bible, we can overcomplicate truth, but truth is simple. It's meant to be simple. It's meant to be something that, regardless of your age, your education, your mental capacity, even, you're able to actually comprehend the gospel. So John talks about that perfect love casts out fear. And I'm convinced that when it comes to evangelism, when it comes to so many other things in the life of so many Christians, again, we're just controlled by fear. We live in a day and age that's steeped in fear. If you turn on your TV and you see all the commercials about fear, the world is ending, everything is bad, you need this, you need that, you need this insurance, you need this product. It's all fear-based. Everything is about fear. And we live in this world, and if we're not aware of that, we're just, of course, steeped in the same sort of fear. But Jesus, who is perfect love, wants to set us free from that fear. And when we then are set free from that fear, then it's just a natural thing to share about Jesus. And I remember clearly as a young man when I was like, okay, I got to share my faith. I got to share about Jesus. I was in school and at work, and you're sitting next to someone on a plane or whatever. I was like, this sort of bad feeling there. Gosh, I got to somehow share about Jesus. But it was so fake. It was so empty because I was still just living in fear. I didn't know Jesus as someone who was in charge of my life. I didn't know Jesus as someone who was transforming my life, where I could see him and his truth transforming me as a man, as someday then as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a minister as well. So I think for so many Christians, it's a matter of just asking Jesus, will you come into my life in a way where I am not controlled by fear? And then another scripture, James talks about that hey, if we lack wisdom, we ask for wisdom, and he loves to give us wisdom. And again, it's another one of those verses that I apply in so many areas of my life. Every time my wife and I have a conversation about one of our kids, and it's like we don't quite know what to do, we just pause and say, okay, God, you're the giver of all wisdom. We need wisdom to know how to help Sebastian here in this situation. He's struggling with this here. What do we do? And we trust, and we then experience as well that God will then show us what to do. He'll give us illustrations. He'll give us the right questions to ask for each of our kids. And that, of course, then applies in every other area of our lives as well. So when it comes to sharing my faith with people, whether they're believers or whether they don't know Jesus at all, it's the same sort of thing for me. I will just ask for wisdom from God. It's like, okay, what's going on in this person's life? Where's sort of the inroad? Where is something that you have given me that I can share with this person? But I think fear is what's holding us back. Fear of, and you can be afraid of so many things, like, will I say the wrong thing? Will I know what to answer to questions and that type of stuff? But again, if you experience Jesus as that perfect love that casts out all that fear, you're like, hey, even if there's a question you don't know the answer to, you know what?
Yeah.
That's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's okay.
You can just say, you know what? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but that's a great question. I would love to sort of explore it more and have more conversation about that. I've done that.
Yeah.
No one runs away screaming because you don't know everything.
Yeah.
That's okay, right? Because you're showing them that kind of humility as well, of saying that, oh, I don't necessarily, that's a super good question, but let's chat about it. Maybe we can talk about it. I can ask other people as well. And you know what? I ask God. He is the giver of all wisdom. So maybe here's something he wants to share with with you through me about whatever question it might be. But again, I remember that feeling of, oh gosh, fear was just all over me because I didn't know Jesus as the transformative reality that I know now.
Well, and that's what changes it, right?
Yeah.
That personal encounter with Jesus. Because if it's just a list of bullet points that you're saying because you should say it, then people are probably going to notice, and it probably won't be as impactful as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was just thinking of a story that happened really just a month and a half ago. I was in Ghana. So I was in Ghana with Joni and Friends with my job, and we were there helping people who don't have a wheelchair get a wheelchair. So we had brought wheelchairs and crutches and canes and that type of stuff to people in a village in the northern part of Ghana. So we're working with local church partners there that had the contact, and then there were people coming there who didn't have any wheelchair that they needed. There was a young man who showed up, and he told me his story. And this young man, he was very well spoken, a very, very intelligent young guy, really, really good English, and just loved chatting with people. And I was like, so what's your story? And he said, I grew up in a Muslim family, as a part of a local mosque, and that's all he's ever known. He had worked at a gold mine, so he was working as a security guard, and they were attacked. The gold mine was attacked by local criminals, and my friend there, he was stabbed several times with a knife. So now he was paralyzed from his chest all the way down. Again, no usage of his legs, and will never have that ever again. And I asked him, and again, this is where you have to be able to ask these questions about this person's story. So I just asked, so how did your local mosque, you say you're part of a mosque, how did they help you? And he looked at me and said, like, oh, they didn't help me at all.
Wow.
And I'm like, so why are you here? How did you come here? And he said, oh, a Christian pastor from my village invited me, even though he knew that I was a Muslim. So you can see already there, something was starting to sort of churn in his head. And he was like, who are these Christians? And I told him that I'm a Christian as well. I've come all the way from America. Again, there are people who have paid money for us to be here because we want to also share about Jesus. And I just asked him, do you mind me sharing a little bit about Jesus? And he said, no, that's fine. And I just, in his case, because I heard his story, I just said, okay, so in Isaiah 53, we hear about Jesus as the suffering servant. We hear how he is acquainted with grief. He's familiar with suffering, and he knows that feeling of even people hiding their face from him. And I just looked at my new friend there and said, like, does that sound like someone that would be relevant for you to get to know? And he started tearing up, and he was like, yeah. And I shared some more stories about Jesus from that passage there in Isaiah 53 and Psalm 23. I shared about that as well. When you're walking in this valley of the shadow of death that you've been walking in for years, that's where he meets you. That's where he wants to transform your life. And then it was just a beautiful, just kingdom of God thing. Then the local pastors had the opportunity to lead this young man to Christ. And we saw him the next 3-4 hours. He was just wheeling around in his new wheelchair, and the light of Jesus was in his eyes. And all it took was just listening to his story and then just asking a question and trusting that this is going to be relevant, something that can open up the conversation. And that's what I just saw with my new brother there, who just, his life was transformed in more ways than one. He got a wheelchair, that's great, but he also got a new destination for eternity. So
that's so beautiful. When I love the just how relevant Jesus is, and the story of the Bible and the questions that people are asking, they're relevant all around the world. Do you find that to be true in all of your different travels around the world?
Absolutely. Yeah, I always go with the same approach wherever I've gone, whether I've gone as a tourist, I go in a ministry context, just asking that question, okay, Jesus, what's going on here that you want me to participate in? What are you already doing? I never come with the arrogance of, I am now bringing Jesus somewhere. He's already there. Jesus is at work all over the world. And I just love just then asking Jesus, so what conversations do you want me to be a part of? I had conversations with, I remember another guy there in Ghana, but it's so fresh because it happened so recently, where he just sat down and talked about his love life, and he wasn't doing very well. And I just looked at him and was like, okay, young man, do you want some input? again, some of these things you're doing here is not working, and they're scaring away this young lady that I can hear you really want to pursue a relationship with her. You're just coming off way clumsy and way too aggressive. Yeah. And he just sat there, oh gosh, I'm so, he was so excited someone would share about that with him. Yeah. That then turned into a conversation about his relationship with Jesus. So we sat there and talked for like an hour about love, and that turned into then a conversation about his relationship with Jesus. He came back the next day and he said, like, I wasn't planning on coming back here. I just wanted to come back and just say thank you, because all the things that you're saying, and I've just been processing it, and I started praying to God, and I was like, I'm so off. Again, there's so many things I don't know about Jesus, and I want to know more. I want to experience more of him. And I was like, I'm so glad. That's so cool, right? And again, just another example where it started a conversation about just love, just young love and relationship messiness. You can find that with anybody, right? Yeah. Again, if you sit down in your local restaurant and strike up conversation with someone, they'll share a story like that, and you have something to share, because God is at work, and the truth of Jesus is relevant into any situation that people struggle with. Again, I see that everywhere. No matter what I do, no matter who I connect with, no matter what we're talking about, I see Christ as something to share. We just have to be just aware enough, in tune enough to then ask that question, just quick check in. Okay, Jesus, what do you want me to share with this person?
Yeah, and willing to take that step, right? Yeah. Overcome that fear and take that step.
Yeah, and again, what's the worst that can happen? Again, they might think you're a little weird or whatever. I was like, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Most of the time though, in my experience, again, like I find that I end up having just incredible conversations with people about some piece of truth, because all truth is God's truth. And if we live from that foundation, then there's no area where it's like, oh gosh, I have nothing to share, or Jesus is not relevant here. Of course he is. Absolutely.
Well, and I know in all of the different titles that you've had, one is Uber driver. So I'd love for you to tell me how that came about and what you learned from that experience.
Yes, absolutely. So I was working and had been working in ministry for many years. I worked as a pastor, and it's a messy story how all of that ended. But we were sitting in Colorado. We were sitting in the house we were renting, and it was a scary situation. Again, we'd just been told by the people we were renting from that we needed to vacate the house within a week. So that's not ideal when you just lost your job. And we had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a brand new baby as well. And we're like, okay, again, we're simple people. We just ask God for wisdom. In this case, we needed wisdom for where do we go? What do we do, right? That can, to some people, it seem a little extreme, but again, that's just how we do it, right? So we just ask God, and over the next few days, we're like, okay, God, what are you saying? Didn't really hear anything. Middle of the night, to my wife, he then spoke and told us it was time for us to move to the Nashville area. Never been to Nashville, didn't know anybody here, didn't know anybody anywhere in Tennessee, but it was just in obedience to God, we traveled across the country and started our life chapter here. And then he challenged me. It's like, I was trying to find different jobs, and it was like, no, I want you to be an Uber driver. And it's like, I don't want to be an Uber driver, because like I can't provide for a family of 5 driving Uber. That's not going to work, while still looking for other jobs as well. But he said 2 things. A, I want to show you that I will continue to do ministry through you, even though you don't have a title, you're just a first name they struggle to pronounce, taking them from A to B in a city that they're visiting. And B, I want to show you in a way that you've never seen it before. I will provide for all your financial needs. So that's the story for another time, but absolutely he did that as well, as far as the financial needs, the miracles that he provided there. We have a long list in my wife's phone of all the different miracles he had to do to keep us afloat there. But as far as the Uber, it was like incredible opportunity to just meet people. Again, no platform, no titles, no nothing to hide behind. I was just your average guy just driving them around. I didn't have any crosses, any Bibles, any pamphlets, nothing in my car. It was just a regular Honda Pilot like the rest of them, right? And people would come in, and it drove more than 6,000 Uber trips in all times of the day and all times of the night as well. So I've done the party scene in Nashville at all crazy times. So lots of fun stories as well. But what we're talking about here specifically, so many times people would come in, we would sit and just chit chat a little bit, And then they would say this sentence, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but. And here comes the affair. Here comes the marriage that's struggling. Here comes issues they're having with a friend or with their kids or with just their job or whatever it is. I had so many opportunities to just, what I would do then, I would just hear their story and then just ask them a simple question. Would you like for me to share what I'm hearing? And they'd be like, yeah, we'd love to hear that. Every single person said they would love to hear that. And I would just share. And at different times, again, it would lead then to conversations about faith, about Christ, or what does it look like? Maybe with a guy who was married, where it's like, what does it look like to actually build your life, your family on Christ? What would that look like for you? Somebody there who has a friendship that's very troubling and lots of codependency. Okay, what would it look like to have healthy relationships? Again, God has something to share about all of those things, but again,
and like giving hope, right?
Exactly.
Like there's a better way.
Yeah, there's a much better way, right?
Yeah.
And I remember this one gentleman, again, I picked him up at like 1:30 in the morning on Broadway. So he had been out having a couple of beers, whatever, with his friends. He came into the car and he was one of those just like, I need to tell you something that I've never shared with anybody else. And then he shared about an ongoing affair. And he started just bawling, and he was like, I know it's wrong. I know God. And I know that I'm doing wrong against God. I'm doing wrong against my wife. I'm doing wrong things against myself and against this woman I'm having an affair with. And I started speaking into this situation, just sharing what I knew that God wanted to say to this man. And I had a very captive audience there. And when the trip was done, I asked him, hey, can I pray for you? And he clung to my hand and he was like squeezing it with so much power. It was like this sort of like last resort sort of prayer. That's what it felt like for him from his perspective. And I just prayed for him to have the courage to face the truth about his life. That was the main thing I prayed about. The following day, he sent me a message and said, I've broken off the affair. I have called a counselor. I'm going to get in counseling, and I'm going to share the truth with my wife as well.
Well, and that's so amazing, and it just sounds like there's such a hunger that people have, like that they just start these conversations, that people are hungry for spiritual conversations,
exactly.
Hungry to hear a different perspective.
Yeah, it's a lie that's so common, especially so many young people are caught up in it that, people don't want to talk about spiritual things. People don't want to hear the name of Jesus. People don't want, it's just not true. It's simply not true. Again, there's a real hunger, there's a real desire, there's a real need. I had my hair cut 3 days ago, and this young lady at my local sport club, again, we started talking about Jesus. It's a natural thing. And she was like, yeah, I'm not really a part of a church. I kind of used to be, but I'm not really now. And I would love to have a real close relationship with Jesus. And she just started asking questions about my relationship with Jesus. And I just had an opportunity to just share with her, where it's like, just a random thing that just takes place, just getting your hair cut, just chatting with people about Christ. And all of that is true for all of us. Again, you don't have to have a special gift. I think sometimes people get so caught up in spiritual gifts and they're like, oh gosh, if I don't have the gift of evangelism, then that's not for me.
I don't have that responsibility.
Exactly,
I can put
right?
that to the side.
And that's the thing, again, it's not, again, if I list my top 5 spiritual gifts, evangelism is not one of them. But that doesn't mean that I don't have endless opportunities to talk to people about Jesus, because it's something that's real to me. It's something that's real in my life. I can't help it. It's a natural, all-encompassing part of my life that, of course, I talk about Jesus, because we make decisions as a family based on what Jesus wants us to do. Even that is something that now, again, we're a family with young kids, and people are asking us about that, where it's like, so how have you chosen to live like this? It's like, we do this because this is what God is leading us to do. These are the choices we're making. These are the choices we're not making, because we trust that this is what's best for us in leading and discipling our children, for them to follow Christ. And people are like, oh gosh, again, like, because they're so not used to Jesus being relevant in those decisions as well.
Yeah.
Whereas like, so many people also who are believers have such a little box where Jesus is relevant. And I just tell people, I don't have that box. Yeah. I talk with Jesus about anything in my life. It's all of it. Again, the most important things and the most irrelevant things. Again, I just chat with him about this. And that's the kind of relationship he longs for with all of us. And then you don't have to worry about, like, do you have that particular spiritual gift? Yeah, there are some people who are these sort of incredible people who just have never met a stranger and just strike up conversations with everybody. Love it. I love those people. But maybe that's not your primary gift, but that doesn't mean that you will not have opportunities to share about Jesus. You just have to have your eyes open.
And
just
be
have
willing.
to, exactly,
Yeah.
have that willingness, and just to ask that question maybe when you encounter people, like, okay, Jesus, give me your ears to hear. Give me your eyes to see. How do you want to meet this person that I'm talking to now?
Absolutely.
That's what I do, and that's why I have so many conversations about
Yeah.
Jesus.
Well, and just your lifestyle and the obedience that you have and the love that is so evident for Jesus. It's such an inspiration. Well, and thank you so much. And I'm wondering, do you have any special projects, anything coming up that you're excited about?
Yes. Again, what's so cool is that just recently, just about a month ago, we started a podcast.
Congratulations.
So again, I've been wanting to start a podcast for years, and just sort of been working through all the different steps. I think there's been a lot of spiritual warfare involved as well. The enemy doesn't like the truth to be shared, but it's called Transformative Truth.
Okay.
So in this podcast, what we do is that, again, we explore how do you experience Jesus as a transformative reality in every sphere of your life. So far we've talked about forgiveness, we've talked about finding your identity in Christ, we've talked about suffering, how Jesus wants to meet you in your suffering and transform your life through suffering. All of us experience suffering of different kinds, but most of us, unfortunately, the suffering is wasted because we don't know that it's through suffering so often that Jesus transforms our lives the most. And just had a podcast where I shared stories about encountering Jesus all over the world. So like you mentioned, I've been in global missions and ministry and have opportunities to meet people all over the world, and just sharing some stories. Most people don't get to travel the world and meet Christians in India and the Philippines and Nigeria or whatever. But I can share some of those stories, and just to encourage people that God is at work. God is changing lives all over the world. And again, his truth is transformative. So yeah, it's a weekly podcast. Again, I have literally at least 100 episodes already written down, details about. So it's not something that's gonna just start and then die out after a week or two. But yeah,
Well, we'll be so excited to check that out. And it's been such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.